Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a transformational leader, a bulletproof leader, a get-it-done leader, a mentor who values people, integrity, and service. These are the words his peers have used to describe him. Today, as a visionary leader, he leads in other ways, working with wholesalers and distributors in Italy to bring fine, handcrafted, eco-friendly objects, planners, and such with a strong positional value to the U.S. He is the co-founder of Positional U.S. and FSG Marketing and Consulting. Please welcome Robert Falvo.
Thank you, Michael. Fabulous introduction.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
I couldn't believe what I read on LinkedIn about you. It was really inspiring and really cool. I say inspiring because I think the purpose of this podcast is to help others achieve success and achieve their vision of success. Mm-hmm. And I think when you hear words of like, I remember this one sentence that stands out to me of one of the people that wrote about you is, Robert would have an army follow him. That to me speaks volumes of success. It doesn't, money, building a company, all the rest doesn't matter. It's that you have worked with people and have served them and have invested in them in your time and in your energy to the point where they'll do anything for you in a positive way. And to me, that is tremendous success. And I hope that in this meeting today, in our conversation today, the people listening can really take away some learning from you and some actionable tips and steps on how to be able to get to a level to where they can lead their company, lead their team, lead their family, lead their communities, and have people follow them the way that you've created in your life.
Well, great. Thank you. And let's definitely talk about all those things because they're exciting to talk about for me, and they're close to my heart and passionate. And so family and business, to me, it's life. It's all together. I think you need to take the strong things from your family and personal life and bring them to your business, and vice versa, because we deal with people, and everyone has their own story. Everyone has their own goals and dreams that they want to achieve. And until you get to know that person and where they're from and what they do and how they do it, you really can't get the most out of them, because you need to know what makes them tick, what's in their mind, what are some of their base values, what are some of their base characteristics that they need to improve upon and or build upon. So great topics. And really exciting to be here.
Cool. So let's start with that. You and I spoke. We got to meet on Zoom, which was really, really cool.
Yeah. How long ago? That was a couple of months ago.
That was
already,
a few
right?
months ago, yeah. But you mentioned you were Italian and from a little town in Italy. Yeah. And immediately you and I connected because of our families and where we're from in Italy. So could you share a little bit about your family history and where you're from?
I absolutely can. Well, I'm from New Jersey,
yes.
But my parents and my grandparents and their people before them came from Calabria, Italy. Small towns, the small town of Soveria Manelli, which is where our company is based that we work with. Where my parents both grew up across the street from each other. My father actually used to serenade my mother up on a balcony. And so that is, in essence, where we come from. They came to the United States. My father came to the United States in the 50s. My mother came a few years later. When my parents got married, my father immediately went to Saudi Arabia for 2 years without her to work. And he was an engineer. He got to work on the Aramco pipeline. They were building oil pipelines and gas pipelines.
Wow.
But then, he had an uncle here. He came here first. And then I can give you the story of how he came. And then, the immigrant story, which is, got to make some money, see what's out there, see if there's any opportunity. send the money back home. Then you bring the wife, and then you bring the uncle and the brother, and they all came together. And probably at some point, as we continue this conversation, I'll explain to you the things I learned by hearing these stories and watching. They came here in the early 50s, and I wasn't born until the end of 1964, almost 1965. So knowing all these things, I have over time come to appreciate and realize that, who you are has a lot to do with a lot of things that you didn't control, and that happened way before your time. And when you can appreciate those things and understand those things is when you can make a jump in leadership. I also think it's just one of those points where when you make it who you are, you automatically become, forget a better leader, you become a better person, which then makes you a better leader, right? I also think, and I don't know if you've had this in your world yet, but I know so many leaders that once they had children, their leadership ability shot through the roof. Their ability to understand other people shot through the roof, right? Same with me. When I had kids, my willingness to become a better leader was raised because now I realize, whoa, this isn't really about me anymore. This is about other people. This is about serving other people. This is about taking someone who really needs you and can't live without you and be successful without you. Now, it's not the same in business. People can live without you, and you start to realize that, hey, this is serious. And I better start to become a better father, a better everything, because becoming a better father always makes you a better leader. Becoming a better person makes you a better leader, right? So I always look at it. I used to talk about, in the middle, I'd put person. And then on the outside, I'd put uncle, brother, cousin, nephew, grandson, husband. If you make this person better, all those things get better, right? So you become better at everything you do. And I think that's is a key point to really understand in the progression of not worrying about where you are currently in your leadership journey, but knowing that the leadership journey's got to continue, and it should be every day that you're getting better and better and better and better, and have that drive to make it happen. I mean, even to this day, my kids are grown, and I'm still trying to figure out the answer to being a parent. What am I going to do at this point in my life? How can I best be a father and connect and make sure that I'm there for what they need? Yet, I got to let them on their own and let them crash once in a while to learn like I did, right? Like we all do. So
I think at a certain point as kids, we just want to make our parents proud, and we just want them to hear that and to share in it with us. I know for me, I did an interview yesterday on LinkedIn and a LinkedIn Live. And I shared some stories there, and my mother played a big role in being able to get me back on my feet. Long story short of just getting me into college and different things. Both my parents played a huge role, but I shout out my mother. And so she called me this morning to kind of like catch up and, said, wow, how powerful it was. And just speaking about how she remembers how painful some of the experiences were that we had together, and not knowing what I was feeling at the time, because I said, wow, looking back at it, I was probably depressed at the time. And this was when I had gotten kicked out of school, and she got me into a new school, and then going through graduation and going to college. So just to kind of like give some context to all of this. And she asked me a few other questions, and really it was, she shared with me a little bit about how she feels about me now. And in the end, me just kind of sharing back some gratitude about her in that moment for me, and that both of them for me in that moment. But at the end of the conversation, it was really just me being able to share, one, gratitude with her, but also not be able to share that gratitude, but be able to hear from her that she's proud of where I am today. Yeah. To me, I think as a child, to what you're speaking to, that's really, I think at a certain point in our lives, that's really all we're looking for from our parents is, I just want to know that you hear me and that you're proud of me. And
listen, you're saying a child. It doesn't, my father has been gone since 2012. Not a day goes by that I don't ask myself, I wonder if he'd be proud of this.
That's right.
Because that's all I care about.
Right.
Right? It is... my father and I had a contentious relationship, and I can get into, I have no problem getting into any of it, but and it kind of made me who I am. But it's the word gratitude that you just used, until you later in life. Glad you learned it now. But as days go by, I realize how powerful that word is. Right? The action of being grateful is just incredibly powerful. I mean, if you start to line, everyone knows this exercise. Line up all the things you want to be grateful for, and just make a list and be grateful for it every day, and start your day that way. You'll realize, really, you have everything you need at your disposal.
So what's amazing is that we assume that so many people know these things, like you just said about everyone knows this exercise. No, I don't know this exercise. I mean, I practice gratitude and I do gratitude journaling and things like that. But I'm interested if you could share a little bit about this exercise, because I'm sure it leads to.
Well, it's just, listen, we all get in funks in life, right? Life is just, the vicissitudes of life can take you anywhere if you let them. So if you start every morning, I get up every morning, and my first thing I do besides my espresso, I have a routine. I get up, I make my espresso, and while I'm making my espresso and drinking my espresso, I get on Facebook and wish everybody a happy birthday who shows up as a birthday.
Cool.
Right? Then I check my soccer newspaper in Italy, just the front page headline, just for about 2 or 3 minutes, finish my thing, and then I go downstairs and I get into prayer. I start prayer, I do some reading, and in that, there is gratitude, right? Matter of fact, I wouldn't even know how to go through my day again if I didn't start that way, because I want to talk about and thank God for everything every experience I've had, because not everyone is great, right? You've just talked about experiences in your life, and at the time you're going through them, you don't realize that how important they are, or how important they're going to be as you progress through life. So, just be grateful for the fact that, when I was driving here, grateful for the fact that I get to sit in a very nice car with heated seats, with my roof open and a little chill coming in, and watching the majesty of the leaves changing up through the thruway in northern New Jersey and through New York. And it was just like, okay, I could think right now of a million things I got to worry about, but I'm not gonna.
Right.
Because I'm lucky, because there's somebody, you don't need to watch late night TV, which I don't, but if you do, those commercials they have with the people in Africa who need help and the people in around the world who've got health issues. You realize how fortunate you are, right? So, and by the way, money has nothing to do with any of that.
No.
This is just just life, right? So that's what's important.
Yeah, and I mean, like you just said too, is in terms of money has nothing to do with it, is it doesn't cost you anything to look outside and see the beautiful turning of the leaves.
You got it, right.
And appreciating what's in front of us, and whether you're religious or not. I was interested in the word prayer. It's certainly tied to religions, but I also think prayer can be meditation. Prayer could be gratitude. And you mentioned it, of like thanking God, and God doesn't have to be this this being that's created by.
But that doesn't mean you have to be Catholic to be successful or go through this exercise, right? There's many ways to go about it.
And that's what I want to share with our audience, is that whether you're tied to religion or not, or whatever it is, it's just being grateful for what's around you, your surroundings, which I think is wonderful.
It is really what it is taking the time, number one, to slow down.
Yeah.
Especially in our world where, if you have a phone in your hand, you could be distracted 24/7, right? And most of that's going to be distracted by nonsense. But just to take that time to start your day in a relaxed state of mind, and I'm going to call it relaxed. It's not always relaxed. It's not easy. By the way, it's not easy every morning. Some mornings I'm in there reading, how many times am I going to do this Our Father? I mean, it's getting on my nerves now, right? But I do it every morning because it's in my note. I have a book every day. It's different prayers, right? So, but you just got to do it. That doesn't mean that it's not working, because I don't walk out of it feeling like, oh man, I am totally relaxed. Some days I want to get up now. I'm like, man, if somebody was in front of me, I think I'd punch them. That can happen, right? It's not always that exercise of what it's supposed to be. But you make it a habit, and it eventually it'll.
And we're not perfect. And I love that you said habit, because I mean that's really what it is. I mean, you see successful people and leaders and people out there, and we think, oh my goodness, they're just motivated. They're highly motivated.
Yeah.
Yes, they are highly motivated. But they also have habits that drive them, like what you just said. You know your morning routine. I know my morning routine. We know what we're going to do in the afternoon. We pretty much have a structure to our days that are our habits, because they drive us for the days that we are spent and exhausted. Right. I'm interested now, you mentioned slow down. And when you think about leadership, and you mentioned it at the top of the show here, in that It was about getting to know the people that you worked with and that worked for you and getting to know them. And to me, that means that you slow down, right? Because you're not just sharing, here's what the agenda, which by the way, just so everybody knows, in part of this history here for you and the people that we're talking about that you led is, you started off as a 1099 contractor with a life insurance company. Yep. You moved very quickly into management, and you started managing people in the life insurance industry. And for our listeners here, this is an industry that is, for lack of a better way of describing it, cutthroat. It is make it or die, because you're living on straight commission. There's no salary. There's no net. There's no safety net. If you're not able to make ends meet, really, or make your numbers, your sales numbers, you're gone. Yeah. And there's somebody else waiting behind you to take your place. So this is a cutthroat industry. And so this is very important to this question here, because you mentioned slowing down and you mentioned getting to know people, and people also spoke about that in your LinkedIn profile and your recommendations. When I read through those and the way that they spoke about you in terms of character and integrity and getting to know them on a personal level, they say that in their recommendation. You slowed down in an industry that is all about speed.
Right. Well, true transparency.
Sure.
Let me talk about what I love. You and I were talking before I think we started here, but about those LinkedIn
individuals
who wrote nice things about me. What I really cherish most about them is when they were done, I was no longer one of their leaders. I didn't control their bonuses. They did it on their own, knowing that I wouldn't be working with them anymore, right? So leadership is stages. Who you are is in stages. So when I came out of college, I didn't want to do anything other than just succeed, work hard. Money was a motivator somewhat, but position and power were more motivators for me, because those were the signs of, okay, now you're moving up. Because in sales, as you know, when you want to move up in management, you need a promotion. So in order to run a promotion, you got to kick ass at what you're doing at the moment. So there wouldn't be anybody I work with, Michael, over the course of 27 years at that company who would use the word relax with Rob Falvo. Not any.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you can't slow down. Relax, it's still not really in my vocabulary. I try to pretend and act like I'm relaxed sometimes, and I am usually. It's in that morning time when I'm in prayer. But after that, I don't have a lot of different speeds, because I don't want a lot of different speeds. Because if I'm with you now, I want to be in top gear, because I want to give you and I want to serve you as best I can, because I made a commitment to you to share information. So yeah, I can be relaxed. But getting to know people is more about an emotional connection. It isn't just about, it doesn't mean having dinner with them every night. It's a matter of making sure they know that around you, there's love, you're there to serve them, and that they don't have to be afraid to make a mistake, because you're not going to crush them. If they have that feeling around you in a business environment where people know they can make a mistake, as a matter of fact, I think a lot of businesses don't do this, and they should. The culture should be where mistakes are looked at as investments in the future, right? Mm-hmm. And that the people that should be really penalized are the ones who hide things, are the ones who play it safe, right? Who don't want to make that mistake because they're afraid of how it might look. Well, they're not afraid of how they might look. They're afraid of their leader. I've worked in environments where the people above me, where they were just waiting for you to make a mistake so they could pounce on you, right? It's not productive. You don't get the best out of people that way. I've worked for people who never even got close to getting the best out of me because I wasn't willing to do it for them. Mm-hmm. So because they didn't get it, and they were just waiting for the negative part rather than the positive part.
How do you create that space? You use the word love, which is very rarely used in the business world.
Yeah, and remember, we use the word love. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm saying it out loud like I love you, but we talked about family. So something I wrote yesterday, when you think about how I look at my family and how I grew up, first thing you learn is, and I learned this in my family, is the collective is more important than the individual, right? So you look at a family that came here with nothing, and the collective, everybody had to play a role. So a successful family is no different than a successful business in the fact that everyone has a role, right? So when you think about what you and I learned, and I'm saying you and I because everybody learns something from their family, right? But I know what I learned. And what I learned is that family, at its best, and it translates to a team and organization too, it's the first place you develop deep relationships. It's my family, and when I say my family, I don't mean my wife and my kids, because to me, family is way more than wife and kids. That's your immediate family. But when I say family, I'm talking about ancestors that died 100 years ago, probably. Okay, it's the first place, and if it's done right, it's your base of security. No matter what happened in my life, I always knew I could go back, right, and be with my family. Security. Doesn't mean they'd be happy with me. Doesn't mean I wouldn't get yelled at as a kid, but I always knew I was safe, right? And I knew I had security there. So, but when you think about a family, first thing is love. We talked about it, right? Love isn't necessarily, my dad wasn't Mr. I love you all the time as I was growing up. Matter of fact, I don't even know how many times I heard it. I'm sure he told it to me, but I knew he loved me. Gestures.
Based on actions.
Actions, right? Love is really a verb more than it is a noun, right? Or any kind, right? I always say to my wife, should we go visit my aunt and uncle? It's an hour drive, hour and a half. And I said, of course we're going to go do that. And it's inconvenient. But how do I know if someone loves me? How do I know someone cares about me? How much they're willing to inconvenience themselves to see me, or I'm willing to inconvenience myself to see them and spend time with them or say hello to them. That's how you know someone really cares.
Right.
So, and in today's world, it's made real easy because I was thinking about this the other day. How many people I don't text that I should just to say, hey, what's up? Hope all's well.
Right.
Even if there's no conversation or you don't get a return back.
Right.
It's so easy. That shows you care, right? So that's something there. But you feel it. It's a feeling. So when I say love in the workplace, it's just a feeling you have to get out there by certain actions. One of the things I loved doing when I had the luxury of doing it was, I had a staff of, let's say, vice presidents and directors and people on our team. I wanted to make sure that we sent flowers to the wife on their anniversary or their birthday because most of these guys or women were traveling and away from home and away from the wife and kids. It wasn't much. But it shows something, right? It's an action that says, wow, this is a company. They sent me flowers on my birthday and saying thank you for supporting the spouse, right? That's how you show people that you love them, right? And you go above the call of duty to what may not be in your work culture or someone's work culture, a action that let's call normal.
Right.
If it's normal, it's probably not enough.
Right.
So something to think about there. But love is number one. The second thing is that you learn in a family if you want to become a great leader. And I did in my family, which is, and this is a word that turns people off, and let me finish before we get done here, which is obedience. Right? That doesn't mean submitting to someone's orders, although in my case, it did mean that, okay? Because think about it. My dad was born in 1926, grew up in the war, was part of fascist Italy, et cetera, et cetera. So my family was not we weren't having a democracy.
Right.
I didn't get any votes. The only vote I got was to shut up, right? That being said, we speak of respect for family authority. Like how I treated my grandparents was immediately looked upon, right? So I didn't have an option. I was actually trained when I walked into my grandparents' house. The first thing I was supposed to do was to go give each one of them a kiss. Done. It wasn't an option, but you were taught
to do
these
that.
are the grandparents. These are the authorities, right? And I knew it because that's where I first learned about hierarchy. Listen, we all have to negotiate a hierarchy in any business. right? Right now, I have a small business. It's me and my wife. I got to negotiate the hierarchy. I'm obviously not in charge, right? So you got to know the hierarchy working. I've worked in hierarchies, and you have to know. But we speak of respect for the authority, as I said. We got to make our children and our people at work and our coworkers, as long as they understand the reason and for each rule that we have, or the reason for why we're doing things, that's how they end up trusting you. You need to be the example, right? Every leader knows that you lead by your example. It's the greatest leadership tool you have is your example, right? So, and by the way, that example can't stop when work is over. It's the example of your life, right? So, third thing you learn in a family, if it's done right, and you want to transfer it to your business world. But I learned this over time, so I'm not going to act as if I, picked up on this when I was 25. Is tolerance. Now, my father did it backwards. He focused, I told you we had a little bit of a contentious relationship. He focused on my faults. Now, I don't hold any grudges because where he came from, he didn't have any leadership training. He didn't know who Zig Ziglar was. He grew up in a time and place where it was, now we use the word old school. I don't know what that was, but that was old school where there was no, they were just pounding you to make you stronger, right? Like steel. So he never really acknowledged any of my strengths. But looking back, I do know this. We go back to number one. I know he did it out of love. He didn't know any better. That's the best he knew. That's all he knew, right? He wasn't getting any parenting books. No one was going to give him any parenting advice. He probably wasn't open to it anyway, right? So he did it out of love because what he was doing is he knew this. If you worked on your weaknesses, it would make you better, right? It's so easy to sit back and say, oh, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this. Great. You keep saying that to yourself. You're not going to be good at it much longer. So you need to work on your weaknesses, not your strengths. Use your strengths and continue to work on them, but you need to work on your weaknesses. That's what makes you better. So it's easy to appreciate a person for his or her qualities, right? It's really easy to do that. But, what's even easier, and you'll find this, I found myself slipping as a parent too. It's way easier to be relentless on someone's weaknesses. It's just easy because they stand out, right? When you make a blunder, you watch an athlete in a game on the line, doesn't make the catch, doesn't hit the shot. Oh man, you're out there. But he took the shot. Right? So how about, listen, he wanted the ball in his hands at the end of the game. We gave it to him. And let's praise him for that because you're not going to make all your shots, right? But if we can find a balance with people between both of those, right? Because, you are as a leader, as a mentor, as someone's manager or supervisor, whatever it is you are, a parent. If you can find what I'll call the fine line between those two things, because I don't think it should be all one. I think people need to hear negative once in a while about what they need to improve upon. Because when it's done in the right spirit, right? The word spirit is part of inspiration. It's in spirit, right? So you are giving it with the right spirit, and they know you care, and they know they love you. Even if you send the message in a bad way, and this is what I ended up getting used to, is when the message is sent in a harsh way, don't worry about how I said it. Worry about what I said. And by the way, as I got a little wiser and older, I can't tell you how many times I've had in conversation where I went up to people after I met with them one-on-one, and I said, hey, listen, how I said it, I really want to apologize for. But what I said, I meant it.
Right.
So take it to heart. Right? Because sometimes in the heat of moment, you let things out. Because let's face it, you're not going to have any real success without any real passion. So if you're trying to achieve something that most people aren't trying to achieve, or trying to break a record of some sort in your company, that's not something that could be dirty work. A lot of energy needs to go into that. A lot of tension needs to go into that. So sometimes when the minute there's two people involved in any situation, they're not always going in the same direction. So knowing where to find that fine line of helping people correct and coach them properly, and knowing when to just, hey, give them props on their strengths right now. That's what they need. That's not going to come to you when you're 20 usually. And if you have it when you're 20, 25, 30 years old, then God bless you, because you'll be way light years ahead of where I was. But that's something that can definitely improves your life, right? So to me, that kind of tolerance is key. A lot of times we don't tolerate, especially when you're a high achiever, you don't tolerate anything other than high achievers. And then I had a mentor. I was lucky enough when I graduated from college and started this career. I ended up with someone who was very passionate, student of success, and he taught me real quick. Hey, listen, if you're trying to build a team with everybody who's like you, you're going to be the only guy on the team. Because not everybody wants to be in that upper 5-10%. Some people are just going to be above average. And you got to be okay with that. The fourth thing is you learn in a family, at least I did, is respect, right? Tolerance is good insofar as it's practical on a equality basis by every family member, right? If some people in a group are tolerant and some aren't, it's just going to lead to infighting or selfishness. So you want to surround yourself and build that culture where everyone respects each other, at least, right? You don't have to agree with everything everyone says, but there's got to be a certain point of respect. But like I said, if you don't have that, it leads to infighting or, fighting of any kind, so to speak. It also leads to selfishness, because I realized I've been in situations where I didn't have respect for some people, and that it led me to become selfish. Not a good thing, right? So respect is pretty important. If you're going to thrive in a relationship, you want to make sure you respect the people you're with. And if you don't, and you don't have to, because if they're not people that you respect as people, then get yourself out of it and get yourself into a new team where you can either thrive and know that you'll have that respect back. But respect, when you think about it, to go back to my previous comments about strengths and weaknesses, respect is just simply knowing that we all have them, strengths and weaknesses. To me, that's something I learned from a young age and watching. And I have two sisters, and we're all different. Doesn't matter that we grew up in the same place. We didn't kind of all take it and translate it the same way. Do you have siblings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you exactly the same?
We are not exactly the same.
So, that's part of it. And the last thing I can tell you is number 5 that I learned being in a family is responsibility. I mean, you are responsible for your name, right? And when we talk about responsibility, we basically mean everything we need to do for ourselves and for our loved ones, and when you're the leader, for all the people who count on you for leadership.
That responsibility is also having to do with the self-development that you've done over the course of the past several years. It's interesting that you bring up a 25-year-old self and not knowing it from there. And I thought it was kind of funny. I kind of was laughing to myself when you said, I didn't know all of this at 25, but I learned tolerance. And I'm going, yeah, the only tolerance I knew at 25 was drinking tolerance, right?
Oh, no doubt. Yeah. And think about this. I used to joke about this through the years, which is, I told you I was in sales, and if I had every single person who I lost from my team because of my lack of ability to lead and manage, I could have a whole separate company.
Yeah.
Whole separate company.
There's so much to unpack in what you shared there, and I really appreciate the preparation that you put into to coming today. I really see it. It translates really well, and being able to dive into your family history and your family story and all the different things that come out of it. There's so much that to unpack there. There's a few things that I want to just mention just personally that kind of triggered for me were focusing on weaknesses. I thought that was interesting. That's certainly something that not that I was raised with, but I think that is culturally easy to do, like you said. And so we focus on, all right, you got an A in math, but you're really struggling with social studies. So we're only going to focus on social studies. Not that was the case for me. I'm just using that as kind of like a hypothetical here. And we go through life. And then more recently in the literature that I've picked up and the people that I started following, it was about moving our weaknesses on, passing them on to someone else. In other words, getting an assistant or a team member or a co-founder or someone, having them pick up our weaknesses. And like you said, like not hiring somebody just like me or working with somebody just like me, and then focusing on our strengths. And so to stay there for a second on the strengths, the analogy that I remember in terms of this is, so Michael Jordan, greatest basketball ever, arguably. LeBron James is biting on his heels, right? Michael Jordan, we can say, is the greatest basketball player ever. And so if we're saying focus on your strengths and not your weaknesses, his strength is basketball. But here's what I'm picking up from what you're putting in here and also in terms of leadership and in terms of self-development is, okay, so basketball is my strength. If I'm Michael Jordan, basketball is my strength. And let's say fixing cars is my weakness. So I'm going to hire a mechanic to fix my Ferrari and all this other stuff, right? But basketball is my strength. Now, inside of that strength, there lies weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And so what Michael Jordan would do is at the end of every game, I read about this about him, at the end of every game, instead of going to the score box and look at how many points he got and how many assists he got, he would ask, how many turnovers did I have? How many steals did I have? How many rebounds did I miss? And the reason for that, and please jump in right after I conclude that, the reason for that is that he said, the points, I'm supposed to make those. Yeah. The assists, I'm supposed to make those. Yeah. The other stuff, that's where I need to improve. Go ahead.
No, listen, as far as I'm concerned, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player ever, right? But I will tell you, I've read Michael Jordan stories before, and the one I always used to love was he'd go out, play a game, just dominate, best in the world. There's no other person on the planet who just did what he did.
Right.
He'd go to the gym and lift weights.
Right.
So when I talk about strengths and weaknesses, I'm talking more about personal stuff. When it comes to work, listen, if you can't do Excel, hire someone.
That's right.
Just get a secretary to do that, or an assistant, or someone who's just great at Excel. If you make $200 an hour, don't cut your own grass. Hire someone to cut your grass, because you could go out and make, now, assuming you can go make it. Right?
Yeah.
There's an opportunity cost. So that's not the kind of strength and weaknesses I'm talking about, right? I'm talking about, hey, you are not great at running meetings. You can't delegate that. How about you get up in front of a microphone at public speaking? If you ever want to, you know this. Yeah. If you want to move and serve large people and move them emotionally, you got to learn how to public speak.
Right.
Don't say, well, I'm nervous. Okay, we're all nervous, right? You've given speeches where you probably still get nervous a little bit before, right? That's good. I'm talking about fixing your strengths or weaknesses as a person, as it pertains to making you better
in what you're
doing, and or as a parent, and or as a little league coach, and or as a uncle, whatever it may be. Things that you can't delegate.
And I love that you really isolated it to that, because that's exactly what I'm saying in terms of the basketball. Is like, that's what you do, right? And so in terms of the leader in the boardroom, if you're not able to run a meeting, you're right, you can't delegate that. So you do need to improve that weakness. Yeah. And there's so many ways.
To your Michael Jordan point, he knew what he could control.
Right.
Right?
It's funny what you say too about the putting in the extra hours, because so many people think as well, I think, that all they got to do is work the 9 to 5.
Yeah,
but it's what you just said of like Michael Jordan going, okay, I did my 9 to 5, I did the game, I did the practice, and now I'm going to go do self-development and lift weights. Yep. And in our respect, in terms of our entrepreneurs out there, our business leaders out there, everybody who's listening, the executives out there and everything, that's the books that we read. Those are the leadership courses that we take. Those are the different coaching courses that we take of, I'm introduced you to Matt Alfonso. That's a mindful living course. Mm-hmm. Someone might say, and I actually know who this someone is because it was a past boss, might say, how is a mindful living course going to help you sell insurance?
Right.
And you could make the argument for that, couldn't you?
Yeah, because I'm not trying to become a better insurance salesperson. I'm trying to become a better person.
Right.
Right? And so I will also tell you, to your point about 9 to 5, and I try to get this to my children constantly. You got to decide that, I built my career working half days. You just got to decide which 12 hours it's going to be. Right?
I love that.
So it's a matter of, I find if you're finding yourself with time on your hands, you're never going to be long-term successful, because if you're working 9 to 5, so is everybody else. As a matter of fact, in today's day and age, 9 to 5 is not even enough. Right? 9 to 5 is average. As a matter of fact, I had to break out of that. I wrote down some things of, I grew up in this great immigrant mentality. But some of the things I had to break out of, one of the things that I had to break the chain of is in my family, and again, no judgment, because they came here with nothing. I think about it. You come to a new country. Talk about taking risk.
Yeah.
You hop on a boat for, I think it was a week or a month or however long it took them to get here.
Right.
You come here with nothing and you build a life. So because it's a different starting point, success for them and security for them is something completely different for me, right? I didn't want to do the same thing. That would be a dishonor to my father to do the same thing he did, right? To him, in my family, if you got a job with benefits, worked 9 to 5 and had your weekends off, and bought a house, you were successful.
You made it.
Yeah. You made it.
Yes.
Guess what? They did. That's great. But am I going to use that same... I would be a failure because their starting line was poverty.
Right.
Mine was college educated at a private university and all access to all this information in the world we have now.
Yeah.
So it would be abject failure.
And they're saying, step it up a notch.
Step it up. Yeah, what are you doing?
Right. That's right. And I just want to clarify, too, a little bit here in that success is what you make of it, and whether you work a 9 to 5 or longer hours or less hours, it's about working smart. It's about loving what you do.
Yeah.
Because when you love what you do, like I'm here with you today, right? I don't get paid to be here.
Yeah.
This is a passion of mine.
Absolutely.
So I don't look at this as hours of work, but it is. These are hours of work that we put into this. But when you're passionate, and that's another thing that I hope that always translates in these podcasts is that we're finding what we love and what we're passionate about. Because like you said earlier too, you talked about speaking with passion and not, to me, what I got from what you were saying earlier about speaking with passion is not filtering. You're not, when you're passionate, when you're in passion, your spirit is good, right? And you have a good spirit, you have a good foundation, you're coming from a good place. There's no filtering. And that's beautiful because that pours out of you into a flow to where 6 hours of work, 8 hours of work, 10 hours of work goes by in a snap of a finger because you're going, how did that go by so quickly? I was in passion. I was in such a flow, in such a state that I enjoyed what I was doing. And so it's if you could find that, that is amazing.
Yeah, you're so right. And you have to be, because if you're going to work 12-hour days and sometimes 14 or 10 or 8, whatever it is, then you've got that so right. One of the things I want to go back on, which is, I don't gauge or judge anyone's success other than one starting point is, what are your goals?
Right.
So to me, I learned a definition of a goal of success when I graduated from college. I told you I had Eric Giglione was one of my mentors. And he turned me on, I think it was Dennis Waitley or one of those Brian Tracy, I can't remember who it was. But success is the daily progression daily progression and achievement of predetermined, worthwhile goals. Worthwhile both to me and to others.
Sounds like a Brian Tracy statement.
I really don't know. In fact, I had breakfast with Brian Tracy once. Matter of fact, I walked out and I'm thinking, I think he's the guy who gave me my definition of success. Yeah,
that's a Brian Tracy statement for sure.
Yeah, it could be. All right, so break down that definition. So I don't care who you are. If you didn't set the goal and achieve it, you're not a success in my book, in my definition, right? Because that means you just came upon it. You didn't plan it. You didn't know what the obstacles were. So that's why I did that and why I thought it was good to have. Second is predetermined goals. So just because I make
X amount,
$500,000 a year and you make 50, guess what? In my definition, you may be more successful than me because your goal may have been to do X and make $50,000 or $48,000 a year. You exceeded your goals. My goal might have been to make $1 million, and I fell far short. So I'm not successful because it's personal, right? People will look at me as successful, but I never felt successful if I wasn't achieving what I wanted, right? Predetermined goals. Last part, most important. Worthwhile both to me and to others. Because if it's only worthwhile to me, it means I'm not serving anybody, right? And if you think about it, if it wasn't worthwhile to others, you could throw in a drug dealer because he's not helping others. That's why you got to throw that in there.
Sure.
So to me, success is, and what you should be working for and how you should be investing your time is based on your personal goals. What's important to you? What's not important to you? You know, I always see people, this whole work-life balance thing has gotten a lot of talk, and it's huge. And believe me, I believe in work-life balance. But there are times in your life where the last thing you should be thinking about is work-life balance. Right? My advice to people who are single is work your tail off now. Work it off now. Don't go clubbing and don't go to a bar. I mean, you could do it, but don't make all your hours. If you have time during the week to do anything, and you have huge goals for the future, then you're not investing your time properly. You're spending time, not investing time. So, listen, I wasn't one of those people who always thought I had to be at my kid's game. I was working because I was always new in my mind. I wanted to be able to write a check to send my kids to private school of their choice when the time came for a university. So do I go see my little kid play t-ball and he can't hit anyway? Or do you think later on he'll appreciate the fact that I was able to help him live his dream because financially my wife and I were able to help him?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying don't go to your kids' games, because if you plan and you do things right, you can be there most of the time. But don't kick yourself in the butt that the whole world is putting on Instagram that they're at all their kids' games. It's okay if you miss one. It's called sacrifice. You know, something that I learned is short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. You know, it was important for my father's family was all here in the United States. They all came, right? But what I saw was my father was an engineer for the state of New Jersey. So he had X amount of vacation time and you know, he obviously wasn't on the highest pay scale. But that being said, he knew the goal was to go to Italy every 2 to 3 years because we couldn't afford to go every year. Also, he had to save up vacation time so that when we did go, we could go for longer, right? You don't want to just go to Italy for a week.
Right.
So that's why sometimes it was 2 years, sometimes it was 3 years.
Right.
But then, what does that mean? It means there's no vacation for 2 years. Right?
Right.
Sounds like such a small sacrifice, but it really wasn't. It was a big sacrifice. Because if you think about it, where'd you go on vacation this year? Where'd you go on vacation this year? Where'd you go on vacation this year? If you say nowhere because I'm trying to save up, it's almost like it's not a badge of honor like it should be.
Right.
It's what's wrong with you? You're not successful. Right? So, I learned quick that, hey, sometimes you got to sacrifice for what you want in the future. And if you don't, you're going to end up being disappointed later. And you make priorities.
Interesting too, because you talked about this earlier about family and how that translates into business and all the values that you learn as family. And there you are with learning the sacrifices that your father made. I'm going to relate some of this back to you. One, about the vacations. My father and I just had recently a really long conversation about his childhood. I need to get my parents in on the podcast. It's They have incredible stories as well. And my grandfather was also, well, he wasn't an immigrant. He was a first generation from Italy here. He was first generation, but he lived through the Great Depression, and had other issues, and led him down a road of alcoholism. Right. So my father grows up in a household with a father who's an alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic, because he worked at Con Ed, had a great job, just like you said, right? Pension, all the rest. Right. They had a house,
success.
Success on quote unquote, air quotes, right? But the one thing that my father said that to me that I didn't understand until recently. He never had a family vacation. He would always ask his father, why don't you get a car? We can go to the beach. We can go here. And I guess, because of my grandfather's alcoholism, he didn't want to drive. But he never had a family vacation.
Wow.
And as children, myself as children, my father always made it a point to go on family vacations. And as a kid, we just went along with it. And now as an adult, he reaches out regularly. Hey, we're going here. Are you coming? Can you come? I'm getting Reno and Mark together. We're going to go here. We're going to go there. And they're actually planning their 50th wedding anniversary in Punta Cana. And they've been on me about getting my passport renewed.
Yeah.
And they've been driving me nuts about it. And that they want the whole family there. And it wasn't until that conversation that I really understood, and I repeated that back to him. I said, now I really understand why you put the emphasis on vacation. It goes back to gratitude for what we have, in that for you had this 2-year span, but yet you were still grateful to be able to go on that vacation. And here's a little contrast of another kid, just maybe about 10 years older or 15 years older than what you are now, who grew up with no vacation, and how that impacted his life.
Yeah, sure.
And then the other thing I want to share with you about sacrifice is today's podcast. I had an opportunity today to go to a performance that my daughter's doing. My daughter's she's 5 years old in kindergarten, and she was picked to do a performance in her class today of The Wild Things, and she got the main character Max. And I really wanted to go to that. My background is in performance. I see it in her. She is a performer. She says it. She's been saying it since she could talk, is that she's going to be a singer. And she gets up and does all these performances in front of us. And so I was like, wow, I really want to go. And I saw you were on the calendar. And I said, well, we'll see if he comes or not, right? Because you got a 2.5 hour drive to get here. And you texted me early in the week, I'll see you on Friday. And I said, sure will. These are the sacrifices. You made a commitment to come here, and I made a commitment to host you. And we have to look at these and these little moments, these decisions that we make, and their importance and their significance. To me, as a leader, which we talk about, the integrity to my guest, integrity to someone who said they're going to come and meet with me, to keep that and to hold that meeting with them, especially when they confirm it with you. And that we live in time. We have so much time. And you were talking about your son's T-ball games, right? We have so much time in life with them. And every moment is precious. Don't get me wrong here. But this is one performance. Thankfully, my wife was able to attend today. I know that it's one performance of many. Right. And I made a sacrifice today to be here with you to perform.
Well, first of all, I appreciate it. And I will tell you this. People will hear this and go, oh my God, I can't believe he did that to his daughter. And I'm going to tell you right now.
She's all right.
No, I know that. My point is, those people, if people look at that and say to you, that's normal, or they say to you, I can't believe you did that. Well, they don't understand your journey. They don't understand your passion. They don't understand your goals, right? So anybody who knows me, that if I have an appointment at a certain time, I'm going to be there at that time. The only thing that would have kept me was death, an accident on the freeway, or if my wife got sick or something happened in major family emergency.
Yeah.
But if I got COVID, I'd have said to you, hey, you want me to wear a mask? I got COVID. Because I was coming here no matter what. Right? And you said, I don't know if you're going to get here. I left at 8 o'clock. It only takes an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes to get here.
Oh, okay.
But I wanted to be ready. I've been up and ready, because when you promise something and you make commitment to goals, and you made a commitment to a podcast and helping other people, listen, anyone who knows me, so I don't ever worry about this, knows that family is first.
That's right.
But to your point, it's a 5th grade performance. Kindergarten. Yeah. Kindergarten performance. There's going to be many others.
Right.
And you're going to get to a lot of them. You're going to get to most of them. Matter of fact, my son had a college soccer career. I didn't miss a game. Not only did I not miss a game, I would have never missed a game. Right. As a matter of fact, even if I was working, I wouldn't have missed a game. And if I was working at a full-time gig where I couldn't get away and wasn't my own self-employed. So you got to pick and choose your battles. Right. And if you're not, it means you're not sacrificing anything. Right. If you're doing what everyone else is doing and what the norm is, then don't think you're going to have a better, above average result on the other end. It's just not,
And that sacrifice, I think, is also what they end up learning. Like you saw that with your father. You saw the sacrifices he made.
Yeah,
and
huge.
You learn from sacrifice. You learn from failure. As you mentioned, too, you learn from mistakes. And I love that of how you were saying about, that was the other piece that I wanted to talk about focusing and allowing employees and team members to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Right?
It takes a while to get to that, but I got to tell you, if I were going back to manage a team now or some sort of organization, that would be first on the list. Listen, I just want everyone to know, don't worry about making a mistake. And I promise you, and you can video this and bring it to me and put it in front of me, that if you do and I am getting on you, then you can call me out on it. Because when people have the ability to go and do it now and know they can work unencumbered, that's when you're going to get 100% effort. You're going to get the most out of someone you can. Now, that being said, they can't be making the same mistake day after day after day after day. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is it's okay to make a mistake.
Well, because what you said earlier too, and you could expand on this, is it's because they're also taking a risk. They're taking a chance.
Yeah. And sometimes, we don't see it in work environments all the time because we're not in it, but think about it. If two of you people who work with you at Denten right now or making decisions and you're not there, but they have to make it, they might make a mistake.
That's right.
But it was better than not making a decision at all.
Correct.
So you got to allow that.
Yes.
So it's pretty important. Yeah.
And that goes back to leadership, right? Is that delegation. So what you're doing by allowing people to make mistakes is one, you're giving them power. Mm-hmm. And you're allowing them to make, and then from that you're building trust.
Right.
There's trust now that's formed between the two that, like you said, now they're going to follow you, like we started off with, follow you anywhere.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to bring up was mentorship. We were talking about this before we were even on air. So many people think that it's, one, they want to go out and find a mentor. And they say, hey, Michael, how do I find a mentor? And I've given my answer multiple times on the podcast, so I would like your answer to that. Because one, having a mentor and being a mentee is an important relationship, but I believe it's not as black and white as people perceive it to be.
Yes. As we spoke about before we started, it is a important facet of improving. So the first thing I would look for in a mentor, and I did when I first graduated college, which was, okay, I want to find someone who's doing and living the lifestyle that I wanted to live. That's the first thing, period, right? Like, I don't go look for a personal trainer who weighs more than me.
Right.
I watch all these people on social media and they're individuals, and I know they mean well and they're pushing health products. Listen, you're not in shape. Knock it off. Just knock it off. Someone's not going to come to you as a mentor, right? If I were looking for a mentor to get me into shape, I'd find someone, okay, that guy looks like I want to look.
Right.
That's got to be my mentor. If financial goals and gain and building your net worth is important, then you need to find a millionaire who's in hopefully in your industry and or other industries who you can pick their brain and emulate, right? And that leads me to my point, which is you don't necessarily have to seek it out. In your environment, you don't have to literally say, hey, could you be my mentor?
Right.
You can watch. So I never really look at it and say, am I someone's mentor? I think I told you this, right? I know this. As a leader, it doesn't matter whether you're someone's mentor or not. You're mentoring. And you're leading. And you're the example. It's about the example. It's about how you live your life day in, day out. How you talk to people day in, day out. Good and bad. Mm-hmm. How you rebound from failures day in and day out. Do you fail forward or are you falling back? What are they seeing? Right? I've had people I worked with, I look at their personal lives and go, they could never be my mentor, right? Because it's just not a good situation, right? So I would never look to them for leadership in that area. I have people who I've looked at over the years and said, wow, okay, so I'm not going to say, hey, you're my mentor. I'm just going to watch them. I'm going to watch what they do. I'm going to listen how they talk. I'm going to call them every once in a while and, hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
They probably didn't even know they were mentoring me.
That's right.
Right? So it's really it's like anything. And this is something my dad drilled into my head, which was you constantly have to be more and more educated in some way, shape, or form. Mm. All right? So I kind of got turned off to education as a young kid in high school and college. I really didn't start reading and learning until after I graduated college and got into business. And now that reading was going to lead to some income, right? So, it's about looking for answers. The reason why you want to mentor is because you don't know how to get what you want,
right?
Or to get the skills, or get the
network
of people around, or what should you be thinking, or where should you be investing your money, or what should you investing your time in on the weekends? What do they do, right? So that's the first thing. But to me, leadership or mentorship, whether I was mentoring them or not mentoring them, was just be the example, right? Be on time, be courageous in your decisions, be thoughtful. Make sure you are serving people rather than them serving you, if at all possible, right? Make sure that you explain things and make sure, and that's how you get a leadership mentor, right? But again, if you want to get specific in what you want to be mentored on, then that you might have to seek out, and that is simply making sure, though, that the person you seek out is what you want to become or go in that direction, because that's what's important. They've already done it. Don't waste your time talking to someone who's divorced 6 times to figure out how to have a happy marriage. It's not going to work out, right? So I think
you might learn from some of their mistakes.
Yeah, I kind of agree and don't agree with that, in the sense that, hey, this guy's been married 50 years. I've been married almost 29 years in another couple weeks. I got to find someone who's been married 50 and go, hey, how'd you do it?
How'd you do it?
Because I'm sure when you get to year 40, there's a difference between years 2 and 5, right?
You want me to tell you the secret of how you do it? I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, go ahead, tell me.
This
is going to be worth my ride right here.
I just looked back at my notes. I'm only 10 years married, so it's not coming from me. This is coming from my parents who are going to be celebrating 50 years in August.
Go ahead.
You mentioned love, you mentioned obedience, and you mentioned tolerance in family. And that is what I see every day in my parents' relationship. They love each other beyond a doubt. Yeah. Beyond a doubt. There is no way, shape, or form. They will defend each other. They will fight with each other, but they love each other, right? Obedience, in the same context that you put it, in that they will be there for each other and do what's asked of them. Of they might not like what's being asked of them to do in the moment, but they know the other person needs it.
Absolutely.
And they will do it.
And by the way, I found that that's part of a happy life. If I'm helping other people be happy, I'm usually happy. Right? And then, in the long term.
And tolerance. Yeah. I mean, my mother puts up with my father and vice versa.
And mine did too.
And vice versa of being tolerant. And I think, I pick all that up from my marriage too, in that, at the end of it all, and we talk about business, and the same thing is that there's love. And there's this, and what I was thinking about with love when you were saying it in the business world too is compassion, is understanding and believing in somebody and understanding that they're trying their best. Mm-hmm. That, having that positive mindset in others, of seeing that they're doing what the best they can do with the tools that they have. And if they fall a little bit short, it's not because they're trying to upset you or hurt you or anything. Like you said before about raising children, you learn so much that it's not about you.
Yeah. And that's when you do get you do lose your patience with kids, is when you start making it about you.
100%.
One thing, I've had the luxury of, we talked about no vacations or some vacations. I've had the luxury of, my kids have been to Italy 35 times, and they're 22, 25,
incredible.
Right? And I remember we traveled with them the minute they were a year old.
Yeah.
And people say, well, I want to go, but I don't want to take my kids. I'm like, why do you want to take your kids? Here's why people don't want to take their kids on vacation when they're little. Because it takes patience.
Yes.
Because if you make the vacation about you and about you want to be comfortable while you're traveling, I mean, it's about goal setting. I wanted to be in Italy.
Right.
So in order to get there, I had to bring my kids. I had to bring a stroller. I had to bring a porta-crib, and I had to schlep that crap through the airport. But that grind was worth it for me the minute I landed and got there, and I got to see my dad and got to have a drink in my hand, and it was all worth it. And all these years, now they have the love for travel, and they understand that it's not all rosy traveling, and that it's not always about you, but the minute you do make it about you is when you start feeling tensions and about things not happening the way you want them. Because believe me, I went through a period of traveling with these kids where I knew it had to be about them and not about me. But sometimes I'd be like, the ticket guy would be like, And I remember this example. One guy told me, "Oh, I don't think your tickets. You can't take off. You're not on this flight." I lost my mind. I literally was going to jump over the counter and whatever.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what I was going to do. But it took my wife to say, whoa, slow down. It can't be right. You booked these tickets months ago, and I know you've checked them 80 times. You checked them every night on you. And it's all because I made it about me. The minute and second I brought my mind to this is what I'm doing and this is what I want is the minute it became a tense situation, right? Now, granted, in those days, I didn't have the luxury of saying I'll wait for the next flight or I got money to book another ticket or any of that kind of stuff. But point is, you make things about yourself, and we all do, and it's kind of fun sometimes, right? And to your point about the back and forth, that's how you make it. You realize that sometimes it's about you, sometimes it's about me, sometimes it's about all of us. And quite frankly, the best marital advice I ever got, I was at a great friend of mine's house, his father. I asked him for advice. He said, the best advice I could give you is to understand that, this was right before I got married. Best advice I could give you is that marriage has nothing to do with love, long-term marriage.
Okay.
It has to do with commitment and loyalty. If you're committed to someone and you're loyal to them, you'll never have any problem. Because you wouldn't get married if you weren't in love, so you already have that.
Okay.
But commitment is something you got to stay with long time, right? Loyalty, long time. And that was the best advice I ever got.
And it all translates back to business and leadership. Everything that you just said there, I mean, we talked about family and relationships and travel and patience. All of that is leadership. I mean, everything, the examples that I highlighted of the recommendations on your LinkedIn were all about that, about patience, about getting to understand and not about ourselves. And I think what you just said there too, in terms of commitment, and the way that I translate that in the business world is commitment to learning. And you talked about this earlier, about always learning, always a commitment to improve upon ourselves. Yeah. Is that if we make that commitment as wherever we are in our journey, as starting out budding entrepreneurs, as just working in as the sales associate and trying to get the sales executive and then director of sales, if we just make the commitment and allow the patience to commit to self-development and learning, be patient on time, allow it to just kind of happen as we set those goals, as you mentioned, it's going to happen. Yeah. You got to have the goals, like you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to have the goals.
Listen, everything starts with that.
You got to have the goals.
How do you know what you're shooting for, right? How do you judge? If you can't measure, then you can't, correct yourself on a daily basis or pat yourself on the back when it's important.
And
right?
It's like you said, because without the goals, then you're flying blindly. And I think, you brought up some examples about with some financial numbers and everything. But I think, when you look at at what you talked about in terms of like focusing on, not focusing, but allowing mistakes to happen. And to me, mistakes, and you said this too, if you learn from these mistakes, you don't necessarily learn from your successes unless you set goals.
Yeah.
Because if the successes are just happening, then what is there to learn from? Because you don't know how you got that success. But if you set the goals to achieve that success, then you could see all the mistakes that happened along the ways to the success. And you can start saying, okay, now I know how I got here. And now I could double it, I could duplicate it, I can triple it, 10 to 10x it, right?
Yeah. And I'm getting flashbacks as you're talking because, and I'm really glad I came in here. And I'm glad I got to meet you. You're really, know how to interview, so it's fantastic.
Oh, cool,
but
thanks.
I will tell you that I remember you just hit a nerve, and I really got to get this back into my life. I used to tell people whenever I talk at our leadership university, I used to tell people, I don't feel I'm up here talking to you because of my success. I feel I'm able to talk to you, and I feel I bring value because of my failures.
Yeah.
Right? The fact that I failed many times over the past 20 years, or whatever time it was at the time I was speaking, because when you're succeeding, it's really hard. That's when you really need to look at, but it's not the natural thing to do. The natural thing to do is I'm succeeding, keep doing what I'm doing, right? Which gets people into trouble eventually because then you're not succeeding anymore, right? But it's those failures, those times. And listen, you may not have that many, but when you do have them, make sure you use them as jumping points. as points of, okay, I'm on the ground now. I didn't get what I want, but I got to figure this out, and I'm going to be back stronger. And we all heard it. We know the boxing analogies, et cetera, but they're real.
They're real.
And they are the parts of your life when you're going to look back and say, thank God I made that decision. Thank God I reacted that way to that failure or that bad decision or that whatever it may be.
Well, they're the reason why what you were talking about in terms of the successes and not looking back and just keep doing what you're doing. They're the reason why those big companies do fail. Like, I think Blockbuster and Netflix would be the most easiest one to bring up as an example. Now, there's a lot of background to that I'm not going to dive into right now, but Blockbuster's flying high on VHS and on DVDs. And here comes Netflix saying, here's what we want to do in terms of mailing. And Blockbuster's saying, here's all the challenges with that. Here's all the problems with that. We're not going to deal with that. We're going to fly high and continue doing what we do best. Right. And they double down, they triple down, they even go, they put as much down as possible on what they do best. And Netflix is saying, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. And I'm going to see the mistakes that you're making, the high fees that you're charging for late fees, the way people can't get back into the stores or whatever it is. And I'm going to take these mistakes and I'm going to make it easier for the consumer. And as they made it easier by mailing DVDs and doing all of this, they started getting market share. And by that time, there was so much momentum in Netflix's favor that Blockbuster couldn't catch up any further. And they went bankrupt. And it just goes to the whole idea of, if you just sit on your laurels and don't look at your mistakes and try to fix them, somebody else is going to see them. And they're going to see those mistakes and they're going to learn from them. And they're going to adapt to them and they're going to build things around it that are going to make them better and stronger and perhaps supersede you.
Yeah, that's a great story. And I think it's a good point for me at this here to say to anyone who's in a leadership position or aspires to become a better leader, the one thing you always need next to you and you can have faith in is one or two people who will tell you what's in your blind spot.
Yeah.
Netflix was just going straight ahead. I mean, Blockbuster was just moving straight ahead. They didn't know what the blind spots were. They didn't even realize that their industry wasn't even going to be around.
Right. They didn't
care.
That
tells you their leaders were just living large on their success and were not trying to move on to the next level and see what was next and see what was coming up. They put the blinders on. Someone needed to tell them this is your blind spot. You're not even seeing the fact that what you're putting out there and people coming into your store to pick up aren't going to be used in 5 years or 10 years, whatever it was, right? So look at Netflix. Netflix was, we'll mail it to you. And then, hey, how about we don't mail it to you? How about we just download it to you?
Right.
And then how about we stream it to you, right? And now Netflix is going through that same thing. They're going to have to figure out what's the next move.
They got people on their
right?
heels, that's for sure.
I was looking at Starbucks today. I don't drink Starbucks or like their coffee or do any of that, but I was reading an article today. Starbucks wants to be your stop, not for coffee, but for electric vehicle charging.
Yeah, because they see it.
Right? But at least they're looking ahead. They're looking ahead. The leadership is looking ahead and realizing, how do I add value or how do I make sure I check my blind spots?
And think about that boardroom conversation, though, right? Is that if that's what they're talking about in this article, right? That means that their leadership, and this, look, we don't know Starbucks leadership at all, but just to use this as an example, it's like a little bit of a case study between us and the conversation that we've had in the context of what we've had. Is that what that means is that you're sitting at a boardroom in a coffee company, and we're all talking about coffee and beans and where we can get the best beans, just to be silly about this a little bit, right? And then this one person raises their hand and says, "Hey, we should have electric car stations, charging stations." What does that say to us about leadership that person was able to raise their hand and say, "Let's talk about cars and the electric vehicles"?
Yeah. My immediate reaction was, first thing I thought was, can you imagine the meeting where the guy said, I'd be like, don't we just sell coffee? Or gal. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. The person who said, hey, let's put electric charging. I would be like, we sell coffee. Yeah. Right? But do we? You know, you know the stories of Acres of Diamonds, right?
I don't.
Okay. So 2 Acres of Diamonds is a guy had a land. Russell Conwell wrote the story. In this Acres of Diamonds, the guy owned this land. He was looking for
diamonds.
Whatever. I think it was gold or diamonds. I can't remember.
Oh, is it where they look, they're digging for and then they find the vein?
Yeah. Well, no. He sells the land.
Right. Yes.
And then they find the biggest diamond mine in the world.
Right.
Right. So he had it. He didn't work hard enough.
Dig an extra 5 feet.
Gave up right before the time and gave up the biggest diamond in the world. But better story because it's a more local story. You know who oh God, I forgot his name now. It's a Connecticut base, but now they're in Yonkers. They're in a few places. Stu Leonard.
Stu Leonard's, of course.
You know Stu Leonard's. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. My first motivational
Grocery shopping
tape
store
I ever listened to was called Lead the Field.
Lead the Field, yes.
Okay. Matter of fact, I listened to it.
Earl Nightingale.
Earl Nightingale, the dean of. I listened to Lead the Field so many times that I sent back my cassettes, and they sent me new ones because I wore them out.
Beautiful.
But in Lead the Field, he talks about Stu Leonard's, and Stu Leonard's was just a gas station, a guy with one pump. I guess it was up in Connecticut. That's the only place I knew Stu Leonard's at the time. And then he started thinking, all these cars are driving by. Maybe I should have milk.
Right.
Or now I can't remember.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was milk, and then maybe I should sell gas.
And
then maybe I'll have some bread.
Right.
And then that's how you got your convenience store. That's how I started Stu Leonard's.
Right.
And now if you go to their Stu Leonard's, it's a spectacular
it's
business.
Tremendous.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? So it's thinking. It's exactly that. It's thinking
differently.
When you want to grow, you'll grow. When you don't, you don't.
The other thing I think that our listeners get out of this too is that no matter where you are in a company, you have a voice, and it matters. And it might not matter in that company, and that's okay, because then you might find that you're in the wrong company.
Absolutely, yeah. And a great book to read on that topic, or I always go refer to books, but you might download it or whatever, is John Maxwell wrote a book called The 360 Leader. Great book, because most people are never going to become the CEO, right? Most people are never going to have the luxury of being the vice president or the executive vice president of a company. So it's called 360 Leader. It's how to lead both ways, how to work with people above you, how to work with people below you, and side to side. So it's the 360 Leader. It's a great, you're right, but you will get better leaders in your middle management situation when you let that kind of environment happen.
Yeah.
Right? Because I always say, how many times where I know I've had people working for me, and I say for me in a sense of a corporate structure, where I knew that if they got promoted, they'd perform better. Because that's personality. I always know me. If I'm told you're now the man, I act more like the man than trying to step up to be the man. Right? So that was a personality trait that I had. So, and that, by the way, was anywhere. Was in athletics, because I was a soccer player, or it was in business, or it's in a social situation. Whatever it is, I just feel like, okay, make the environment where I can show you what I can do, and I'll do it.
Right.
But don't make the environment where we're blocked, or where you're making too many rules, or you're doing things that suppress ideas, or you get chastised for sounding stupid, right? I mean, think about it. We're going to put a guy on the moon. Okay.
Right.
Right?
Which is also a perfect example of setting goals, because that's JFK makes that goal. He makes this statement, which he created a goal for NASA that they weren't aware of.
Yeah.
And he created this goal. He said, "Hey, we're going to put and he put a definition on it of we're going to put a man on the moon by 19. Please say the year for me."
Well, he did it in 1969.
1969.
Yeah.
We're going to put a man on the moon by 1969. Yeah. And so he only had a few years for them to figure that out, and they had nothing going on yet. But they made a very clear goal. And they soon accomplished that. This has been great.
Yeah, another powerful example of goal setting. But goal setting is having that vision, which is really the key. It's what I always said. What's the vision of the life you want?
Right.
Start there.
Right.
Right. Start there, because you're the only one who has it. So a great example. I think I put in my. Somewhere what you asked in the
my bio, yeah.
One of the books that had an impact, and The Agony and Ecstasy with Michelangelo. And the only thing I really remember out of it was like a lot of pages my dad forced me to kind of read it, and that's a whole nother. We could have a whole podcast on the things my dad forced me to do that I was lucky he forced me to do. But in it, Michelangelo at the time, obviously one of the greatest artist alive, was in
one of my favorites,
Florence, right? And one of the best Ninja Turtles available.
That's right.
So he would walk many miles to go to marble mines in Carrara, which is. And they ask him, "Why do you go? You work for princes and dukes and lords, and they can send someone to get the piece of marble." He says, "No. He says, I have to see it. he's the only one with the vision. He goes, I got to look at a piece of marble and say, I got to be able to look at it and see what I have a vision for the sculpture inside of it without any encumbrances.
Right.
Then I just chisel to set it free.
That's right.
Right? He had the vision. No one else could go pick it for him.
That's right.
Because you can't describe that. Right? I can't describe what you want your life to be like. Only you can. You can't even have your wife help you. Well, she'd probably give you the image and then you can spit it out, right?
Right?
But you get the point, which is that vision of what you want your life to be like is so important, especially at a young age. Because then what you can't do is lie to yourself and say, well, I don't really want that because you failed. You weren't willing to do the work to get it, right? So always be honest with yourself when you're setting goals. And I have a quick, surefire way of deciding whether something's really your goal or just a wish and that is simple. When you write down your goal, the first thing everybody does is write down all the things that it's going to make me happy, it's going to make me this, it's going to make me that, right? And all the positives. I just say do this. Write down all the things in another line that you're going to have to sacrifice in order to achieve it.
Oh, I love that.
And then once you read that list, say, is it worth it to me? If it's not a goal.
That's right.
Plain and simple. It's easy. You don't have to worry. If it's, I'm going to have to not, I'm going to have to not, one that most of us go through. I'm going to lose 30 pounds. Sure. Okay, great. What do I have to sacrifice? Spaghetti, beer, wine, bread, cheese. Done. Not a goal. I don't really want to lose 30 pounds. I really don't. It's just not worth it to me, right? It's not worth it to me. Now, different situation. Doctor says, hey, Rob, you need to lose 30 pounds or you're going to die. Guess what? Motivation just changed.
Yes.
It is worth it to me.
Yes.
Simple.
I like that you just did that simple little like contrast to in that goal because goals can change is what you're saying. And I really appreciate that. And I also just want to touch on goals and say
the motivation changes.
Well, motivation changes, yeah. And that so many people think about manifesting and don't understand what manifesting is. But manifesting is essentially goal setting. If you set a goal and you create a plan to attain it and achieve it, you've manifested.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. That's why, remember what I told you, you have to, if it's not written down.
Right.
And I think that's the biggest mistake people make.
Right.
They don't write down their goals. They don't write down their wants, goals, and dreams. And by the way, when we talk about goal setting, I just want to make sure for listeners that they're not always thinking that we're talking about I want to make blank amount a year or I want to get this promotion. It could do with your vacations. It could do with your kids' education. It could do with how much money you're going to donate to charity. It's a lot of different things, right? So very important in goal setting because I feel so many times people will, and I know this is a fact, most people spend more time planning their vacations than unfortunately they do planning their lives.
Yes.
And that's just not ideal.
I think to your point in terms of goal setting, it's that it's what's the life that you want to create. And all the other stuff falls into place, how much you earn and vacation and time spent with family and work hours. If you envision the life you want to create, all of those will fall into place in your vision board and your goal setting and all of that.
Right. And those, by the way, when you have all those things together in vision, you can knock out any incongruencies, which means you can't say you want X, X, and X that are going to take a lot of time investment on your part right now, and then say you want all this family time. It just can't balance.
Right.
It's incongruent.
Right.
So then you get frustrated, and you think the system doesn't work. No, the system works. You're just not honest with yourself.
Right.
Right?
Of what you want. Yeah.
Of what you want. Right? So, and that's okay. It's not really what you want.
Because it all comes with a price.
Yeah, if you're not willing to pay, it's okay to want nice things. It's okay to want great vacations. It's okay to want to spend, matter of fact, every moment of your time with your kids when they're little, right? But it's not realistic.
I can't believe I'm going to quote this person. So please don't take this just take it for the quote it is.
Yeah.
But I just heard recently Kanye West was talking about his mom. And she said to him, be careful what you wish for. And one, we could see how that's playing out in his life, but not to speak about him or anything in terms of media. But it's be careful what you wish for, because for me, one of my goals or dreams was to own a Lamborghini, right? And I remember Matt asked me the question why. My current coach, Merritt, asked me the question why. And I spoke about all the reasons why. I soon learned it wasn't about owning a Lamborghini for me. There's this childhood dream of it, of like the little Hot Wheels cars and everything. But I didn't want to your point 100%, I didn't want to make the sacrifice. I don't want to make the sacrifices that it would take me to get to owning a Lamborghini. Now, doesn't mean that owning a Lamborghini might not happen in my trajectory. It's just not a goal anymore.
Right.
It might happen.
Well, you realize this is not that important. By the way, that's a kid's dream.
Right.
And there are, listen, I was in a culture where Lamborghinis and Ferraris and Rolls Royces, and they're all part of it.
Right.
But listen, I'm not a car guy. I have a nice car, but I'm not a car guy. I don't fancy things aren't that important to me. I'd rather spend $200 on a piece of cheese than
I want to eat with you.
Yeah, right. Well, it happened. But my point is that's more important to me than a watch, right?
Right.
Or so that's why it's personal, Mike. Right, Michael? It's personal because it's got to be what your vision. It's got to be your wants, and then you come into line when you figure out whether you really want it or you don't really want it, right? And I read, I think it's Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. His first one, I think.
Yep.
Where he talks about, and it may be a different book, so forgive me if it is, but where he talks about make sure the ladder you're climbing is up against the right wall, so that when you get to the top, you're not on the wrong wall.
Right.
Which is basically make sure, to your point of what you was told, which I guess make sure. Yeah. Be careful what you wish for. Yeah. Because you might get it.
Yeah. And you might be climbing the wrong ladder on the wrong wall. I love that. You've read a lot of books. I love. You mentioned you have a library of over 500 books.
I do. Matter of fact, my family makes fun. We've moved many times, so my family makes fun of me. He goes, "Dad, we're moving these books again." I'm like, "Yeah, this is going to be your inheritance. Because if this is all you ever inherited, I've given you millions of dollars." I
attribute a lot of my learning to the mentors in my life, the relationships in my life. And the books that I've read and the courses, of course, I've taken, but the books that I've been reading, the biographies, the different learning. So I want to just mention some of the books because somebody who is as well read as you with a library of over 500 books, and then to at least list only a handful, they obviously were very significant in your learning and in what you've accomplished in your life. So we have the Bible, we have Man's Search for Meaning, The Magic of Thinking Big and Habits of Highly Effective People, Learned Optimism, The Agony and the Ecstasy.
Which I just talked to you about.
A biographical novel on Michelangelo, which that one I want to read. And then also The 360 Leader. So wonderful books. All books certainly recommended by Rob here. But I want to end with this in a quote that you, and this is why I bring up the books, is your quote here mantra that you live by is he who has a why to live for, he who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. And that's by Nietzsche, right?
Yeah, and I got that not from reading Nietzsche.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to tell you where I got it from.
Nietzsche, yeah.
It's a Nietzsche quote, but in the book Man's Search for Meaning.
One of the greatest philosophers.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. But in the book Man's Search for Meaning, I probably should have put this on there.
That's okay.
I knew it was a Nietzsche quote.
Don't worry.
In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl was a concentration camp.
Oh, yes.
And it was the most powerful book because he talked about logotherapy, and you can look it up. But I'm going to tell you, if you
tell us logotherapy.
Read that. No, I don't know much about logotherapy. Okay. But what it was is, in your mind, you create the world you live in, right?
Yeah.
So this guy survived the concentration camp, and then when you read this book, he talks about how he survived.
The power of why, yeah.
How he survived the circumstances he was in. It's incredible. It's incredible.
I know.
And by the way, a lot of these books, I worked for a company called American Income Life. It was founded by a guy named Bernard Rappaport. If you look him up, he passed away years ago. But he founded this company, and he was an avid reader. I mean, he was voracious. So I tried to just read whatever he was telling us to read or whatever the case was.
It's incredible.
So, as I told you, I went through, listen, I wasn't an academic. I barely graduated from university and from college. But when I got out and got into this environment and knew that a leader had to be a reader and had to learn and become better, and I wanted to become better. And then finally all the things my dad was telling me was kicking in and how important it was, I started basically eating books. I was reading. Matter of fact, reading was starting to interfere with my work. Put it that way. Which I went through a period there. So I have a lot of books
it's good interference.
I probably have 100 books in my library that I didn't even get to yet, right? And I don't know when I will or if I will because I keep rereading. I'm rereading 360 Leader. But the point was when he turned me on to that book, because I asked him that same question you asked me.
Yeah.
He gave me another one called Mumford, Techniques in Civilization. Mumford was a writer. And I read it. I go, hey, Mr. Rapport, this is way too intense for me. I can't read this. But thanks anyway. So I read the other ones. But all those other ones were books that he gave us to read. And that book, because sometimes you read things at a point in your life. And that book to me, when I read Man's Search for Meaning, it just hit me. Matter of fact, now you make me want to reread it again. I probably should pull it off the shelf. I think I have 3 or 4 copies. I always want to give it to someone when I feel there's a time to give it to someone. And it hit me like, okay, there isn't anything. There was a point in time, I want to say I was probably 30-something when I read it, 32. And it made me realize that, to what we're talking about, that you can do anything. If this guy can survive a concentration camp and come out and be an author and professor and all these things, you've got the setup for whatever it is you're choosing to do.
Right.
It's just a matter of whether you want to or whether you don't, or whether you have the drive or whether you don't have the drive. Right. So that's why it was so powerful.
It's our brains are so powerful. Our minds, the stories that we create in our minds are the power.
Yeah.
I know a different version of the story, a different experience in that I just heard this recently in a different book, and he was held hostage in one of, you know what I'm talking about?
No,
you don't.
No.
Okay, I thought you nodded. I think it was in Vietnam, and he was held for a certain amount of time, over a year's time or something, and it could have been Korean War or Vietnam War. But anyway, the idea was the same thing that you're talking about in terms of the story he created for himself, and that while he was imprisoned, why he was able to make it through and why others couldn't was he created a story for himself of how what life was like for him and how he was going to get out and how it was going to look like. But he was also realistic to it, to where what he said was, what I heard back from the book was that some people would think, you know what, we're going to be rescued in a month. And then it wasn't realistic enough.
Yeah, right.
And so a month came and passed and they lost hope.
Right. And it's probably a similar, I haven't read it now in 20 years, but probably similar
in
concept. Hope. By the way,
that's it. That's what I'm trying to get at here is that you create the story, but understand to be realistic in this story and to never lose hope. Because once that Christmas would pass or that next date would pass, hope diminishes. And the more it diminishes, then the less likely you are to survive.
Yeah. And you saw it was probably one of my other ones. And you learn that as you go through life, which is you can put all the timelines you want on things. They don't happen all the time on the timelines. So I think I have that quote in there. I've been saying it for years, which is God's delays are not necessarily God's denials in my world. Right? Just because something doesn't happen right now doesn't mean it's not going to happen 10 years from now or 15 years from now. I may not even want it anymore, but he wants me to have it, so I'm going to have it. Right? So my point is, don't get discouraged when things don't happen on your timeline all the time. Right? So this gentleman who you're talking about, that wasn't the senator from Arizona, was it? Who was in the he was
McCain?
Was McCain?
I know that's not that. I would have remembered that name now.
Yeah, because he was obviously.
I'm even trying to remember the book that it came from, but.
But yeah, timing is, you realize that 2 things. You realize time is short, but you also realize time is long.
Yeah.
You got time. And I forget, there's an influencer out there I don't follow, but I heard him say this, and I'm trying to think of his name now.
Anyway.
Whatever. But his point is, hey, listen, if you're 30 years old, don't act like your world's over if you haven't achieved the goal you have, right? Because I remember saying
Is it Gary Vee?
Gary Vee. Yeah.
And
it is so true. I remember saying stupid stuff at 22 years old that I'm going to do this by this time. Stop it.
It's crazy.
And it's okay. You got to have goals.
But we're different people,
No,
too.
but at the time, it's great. But
Lamborghini, right?
And I also sometimes hesitate to tell people that, because some people take it and go, oh, then I'll relax this weekend. That's not what I meant. That's not my point. My point is, if you're working hard and it doesn't happen, then don't fret. If you're not working hard, it's never going to happen. So don't worry about it. Just get rid of the deadline, right? So life is fun. Yeah. Life is exciting. You, as you said, you can create it. You can decide how you're going to learn from your past. We have another minute or two.
Sure.
I'm going to tell you a couple of things. I try to think back to little things that happened in my life growing up that I then turned into something. So as a leader, these are some things I learned from my parents. And I'll tell you how So my dad did not want me watching TV a lot, which I loved. So he would say to me, you're not going to watch TV till after your homework's done. And that, could be probably about 8 o'clock at night. So I'm probably allowed to watch TV 8 to 8:30.
I'm highly laughing and smiling over here quietly because I do this to my daughters.
I know, but they have other options, right? But wait till I turn you how I turned all these things into leadership lessons, which is, so now keep in mind to the audience, TVs back in my day when I was 10 or 12 years old.
To turn a knob.
Big old TVs, big, thick, they were into, So I'd get home from school, let's say 3:30, 4 o'clock. He wasn't getting home till 5. So I'm like, I'm going to sneak in some TV. No one's home, right? Or basically, I'm going to disobey my father.
Sure.
So, and which makes it all that more exciting, right? So I watch the TV, 4:45, I shut it down, right? 45 minutes, I watch the TV. I better shut this down. I got all nervous. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking I got one over him, right? What does my father do? Puts his hand behind the TV. It's hot.
Must have been on.
Leadership lesson learned. Inspect what you expect. Don't just ask, did you watch TV or did you do X? Inspect it. See it. It's too easy to say, well, I trust you. Just because you trust someone doesn't mean they don't need to be inspected. Sure. Right? So that was the first thing. Second thing is this.
That's great.
We talked about always improving and always have improved. So I think it was 6th grade or 7th grade or somewhere around there, 8th grade. I can't remember. Maybe even 9th grade for all I know. I think I got a C in math, but I struggled. Finally, the school year's over. I'm like, hallelujah. Last day. You know that feeling you have when it was the last day of school and you don't need to go anywhere and it's just summer vacation. And before I started working, so it's a summer vacation. Well, my summer vacation lasted from 3:30 to 5 o'clock because my dad showed up on that last day of school with a math book that he and I were going to work on every single day that summer.
Right.
Killed my life, ruined my life. I was I couldn't believe it.
Yep.
Right? But what's the lesson? You can always improve. And in my the world that I grew up in, my dad, school-wise, there was A's, B's, and failure. There was no C's, no D's, anything below average. Average or below average means you are a failure. He would literally say that to me. So there were A's and B's. It was high level of expectation, right? Which is also a nice thing to have as a leader, as long as you don't do it his way. And by the way, Dad, I love you. And he didn't do it on purpose. He did it with love. Well, right? in
context, all
matter
that.
Fact, I think back, I was lucky to have a father like that, right? Yeah. So that was sick of it.
Well, and you said it before too. It's because his bar was higher because he came from nothing. Yeah. And he's setting a higher bar for you.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
so
continue.
Here's another one. So I told you, Catholic, we go to church. And, you're weaseling around church. I'm not listening to anything. I'm just going because my parents made me. Well, it comes time to kneel at the church. So, you got other people in the pew. You're kneeling. Other kids are kneeling and leaning their butts back on the church.
Yep.
Oh, man. My father would flip out. You are not leaning back, sitting back while you're supposed to be kneeling. You had to hold yourself up. And I had to do that.
No slouch. Yep.
Matter of fact, I only did it once. Once you did it once, you weren't doing it again. No. I did it to my kids. Yeah. But then you realize that is just because other people are doing it doesn't mean it's right. Right? So don't lower your standards. Be the standard. Right? So I learned that from that little thing. Okay, so always learning, always getting new answers. There was no internet. Keep in mind, again, for a thing, you couldn't Google anything. Because thank God, because he would have made me be on Google constantly. My father invested in Encyclopedia Britannica. If you look it up, I'm sure they were costly. He also invested in Junior Encyclopedia Britannica. These were books A to Z, and any subject, you've got to go look it up. Right? We had them in his den bookcase. He bought the juniors because he knew I couldn't. The other ones were high level.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my life of growing up, if we were watching TV or together or doing something, and I had a question, he goes, "Go look it up." So I had to constantly go in there and look at the encyclopedia. When I was younger, I had the Encyclopedia Juniors, and when I was older, I had the encyclopedia. And what I learned from that was, whenever you need to know something, ask the question and then go find the answer. Right? Which is, you could always be learning.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's easy. If you're watching a show and you went, "Oh, who's that person? Oh, let me look that up." Boom.
Yeah.
But I had to go find they weren't A, B, C. There wasn't 26. So I had to find, it was like A to CL. So I had to figure out what the topic was and then go look at it. And then I had to go back and explain it to them.
Yeah.
So it was education, learn more, do more. And it didn't mean just formal, but just always be asking for new things and learning new things. Great leaders need to be lifelong learners. That's really the key there. Mm-hmm. And that is the key, lifelong learners. I'm read leadership books every morning because who knows what's next?
Hungry
right?
for it.
Who knows what's next? And just to give you one last great story of how important education was and reading was to my dad, and to make sure I passed it on to me. I told you, grew up in the war. So during the war in Europe, his mom would give him, I guess, the equivalent of a nickel or a penny to make sure he had something to eat when he went to school. Well, come to find out, 2 weeks later, he gets very sick, and he's not getting skinny, which probably wasn't uncommon in those days. We're talking about poverty, and they even lived in a cave for like a week. My grandfather ate a shoe sole. He boiled it and boiled it and boiled it. So we're not talking that he was missing meals, but went to the doctor. The doctor said, "Are you eating to my?" And he started crying because he was taking the penny, saving it, and buying a book because he wanted to read more than he ate, more than he wanted to eat. So that's how important reading was to him as a kid who, I'm talking about, he was born in 1926, so we're probably talking about sometime in, 1939. We're talking about the fact that he was maybe 10 or 12 years old. So when you, at that age, are choosing to buy a book when you could getting something to eat and you're starving for days, that's something that'll tell you that you really have the will to learn and read and learn something new. Desire, right, to be educated. So those are powerful tenets that have stayed with me. And again, I rebelled against it till after I got out of college. Yeah. Right?
I appreciate you sharing all of that, and kind of like to bring it home for you. What's your father's name?
Sante.
Some of the things that I heard you say in all of this is, so just to start, is that one of the things that you've said and have almost apologized for is your father's sternness and his discipline, right? But what I also heard in all of this in terms of leadership and relating it to leadership is your father presented tools to you by investing in the encyclopedia. He also shared his time with you in spending the time to teach you the math and to spend the time with the books with you.
And one key feature there, I got to say this. He only spent time with me on the things that he thought were important for me to have a better life. That's right. I was, and I still am to this day, am a passionate, fanatic soccer fan. And I played. Yeah. And I played in college. He hated it because he thought I was wasting time. Yeah. Wasting time. Yeah. Wasting time.
Yeah. But he gave you what I'm saying here is that what I realized from what you've shared here is he was constantly giving you the tools. But here's the thing: is what I'm trying to drive home here is that as leaders, because that's what we've been talking so much about, is that a leader can say, go out and be successful. Go out and set goals. You made these mistakes. Here's the mistakes. Let me highlight them for you. Here's the ways that you got to fix them. Go improve them and go out and go do it and all, right? And what I've heard from you, and sure, maybe he's done that from time to time. Everybody does, right? But what I've heard from you is that he invested the time to spend with you to fix those mistakes that he saw. He invested the time and money to buy you the tools to help you. And the only reason why he thought soccer was a waste of time was because he was taught that was a waste of time.
No doubt, yeah.
And he didn't understand that actually the athleticism, the workout, the dopamine that was going through your body and was actually fueling your brain.
And he also didn't understand the confidence it gave me. But if I was good at it.
But if he did, he would have you in soccer every single day, right? So what I draw from all of this and for our listeners here is that there's sometimes people in our lives, family members, loved ones, coaches, bosses, mentors, people who work us hard and we don't understand and we sometimes hate them for it and we're angry with them and everything. But if we could learn to understand them, learn to find out what's driving them. So as you just said, your father was spending his money that he was supposed to spend on food, on books to learn. And so if we can understand what's driving this person and the hunger that they have inside of them, and what are they trying to pass on to us, we can then appreciate the tools that they give us. It doesn't dismiss, and first of all, let's just also understand something in that. It doesn't mean that if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to stay in it. That's not what we're saying at all.
No.
What I'm saying is that if someone's working you hard, understand why and understand their intentions. And as you said, the spirit behind it. What was your father's spirit? And that's what you've taken into your leadership life.
Yeah, and the point of that is, to your point, which you just made that point right there is worth anything to someone who just heard what you said. Matt, I'm going to go on top of that and say this. When you have people in your life who are making you uncomfortable and pushing you to be better, those are the people you need to spend time with.
Those are the people.
The people that are trying to make you comfortable, you need to get away from them fast. You can still be your friends with them. And you learn that as you go through life, that there's going to be certain friends you don't spend time with. You can still be your friends, you still love them, but you don't spend time with them because they're not going in the same direction you are. Yeah. So very important point you just made. As a matter of fact, that was actually a brilliant point.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you. Rob, this has been phenomenal. I am appreciative. I've gotten so many gifts from you today from your company. These daily planners and notebooks and everything, and we're going to be using them at home. My daughters like to draw and color, so I know we're going to be using that one without the lines. There's so much that you have to offer, and I know that you and I have talked about you wanting a podcast, but I certainly see it. I mean, we're almost hitting the 2-hour mark here. I can certainly see why you need a podcast, sir. I want to thank you so much for coming on. Any final thoughts?
Michael, thank you very much. I feel honored that you invited me here, and I feel blessed, and I hope we can serve many people and continue your good work because you're making a big impact.
Thank you. I know that this will serve many people. And any ways that people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can look me up on LinkedIn, Robert Falvo. You can call me on my cell phone if you'd like, 973-908-9458, 973-908-9458. Just send me a text or drop me a call and let me know where you found out.
And show Rob some love and some gratitude for the show. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Appreciate it. You have a blessed day, okay?
Awesome.